The storm in the cave, the rain came suddenly. One moment the sky was only dark, the next it broke open like a flood. Heavy drops slammed into the ground, cold and sharp, turning the dirt into mud in seconds. Trees bent under the wind. The forest groaned as if it was alive and angry. The traveler ran through the storm. His jacket was soaked through, his boots slipping on wet roots. He pulled the hood tighter, but the water still found its way down his neck and back. He needed shelter. Any shelter. If he stayed out here much longer, the storm would break him. Lightning cracked across the sky. For a second, the whole forest lit up, every branch and leaf glowing silver. In that flash, he saw something. A dark opening in the hillside, half hidden by vines and stone. A cave. He hurried toward it, slipping once, catching himself on a tree. His heart pounded hard, half from fear, half from hope. The entrance was low, wide and black inside. Rain poured over the rocks above it, but the opening itself looked dry. He ducked in. The storm followed him only a few steps before the sound began to fade. The deeper he went, the less he heard of the rain. The cave smelled of damp earth, old stone, and something else, something faint, sharp, almost metallic. He stopped after a dozen steps, waiting for his eyes to adjust. The floor was uneven but solid. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. The cave stretched deeper than he first thought. Shadows pressed in around him, thick and heavy. For a moment he simply breathed. Relief washed over him. He was safe from the storm, at least for now. The cave was cold, but it was better than the furious rain outside. Then he heard it. A sound. Small, weak, almost lost in the drip of water. He froze. His breath caught in his throat. It came again. A faint, thin cry, not like the growl of an animal, not like the rustle of bats. It was soft, fragile. It sounded almost human. The traveler's skin prickled. He turned slowly, eyes searching the dark. The cry came from deeper inside the cave, bouncing off the stone wall so he couldn't tell the exact direction. He told himself it could be anything. A trick of the wind. A bird caught inside. A fox, maybe. But his chest felt tight. Something about the sound was wrong. It carried fear, pain, and need. He hesitated. Part of him wanted to stop here, to stay near the entrance, wait out the storm, and not go any deeper. The cave was dark, and darkness hides things. But the sound came again. A whimper this time, weaker, as if whoever or whatever made it was fading. His feet began to move before his mind made the choice. Step by step, he went deeper. The air grew colder. The metallic smell grew stronger. He slid a hand along the wall to steady himself. The rock was rough and damp. Another flash of lightning lit the entrance behind him. For a heartbeat, the cave glowed, and in that moment he thought he saw movement further ahead. Shadows shifting. Something crouched low. His pulse hammered. He stopped again. He listened, breathing, shallow, faint, not his. The traveler swallowed. His mouth was dry now. Every instinct told him to turn back, but another instinct pushed him forward. The sound was too much like a cry for help. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flashlight. The beam shook in his hand as he clicked it on. A narrow circle of light cut through the dark, crawling along stone, dust, and broken rocks. He swept the light slowly, every corner of the cave revealed inch by inch. At first he saw nothing unusual, just stone, cracks, and more shadows. Then at the far edge of the beam he saw something. Two shapes, curled close together, thin, still. The traveler froze again, his breath shallow. One shape was larger, stretched out on the ground. The other was small, pressed against it, clinging. The light caught on faces, faces that were not human. Pale skin that glimmered faintly like wet stone. Large eyes half closed, glowing dimly in the dark. The traveler's hand trembled. His light wavered. They were alive. Barely. The larger one, clearly a mother, lifted her head weakly, then dropped it again. The smaller one whimpered softly, the same sound he had followed. They were not animals, not human. Not anything he had ever seen before. They were alien and they were starving. The traveler's world seemed to tilt. Questions crashed into his mind all at once. Why were they here? Why in this cave? How long had they been lying there? And most of all, what should he do now? The storm outside roared again, but he hardly heard it anymore. The real storm was inside him now. In that cave, in that moment, he stood between fear and choice. He had come only for shelter, but what he found was far more than safety from the rain. He had found a secret, fragile and strange, one that might change everything. He raised the flashlight higher. The mother's eyes met his. They were filled not with threat, but with silent pleading, and the traveler realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm about to begin inside this cave. The discovery. The flashlight shook in his hand, its beam dancing across stone until it rested on them again. The two figures curled in the shadows. For a long moment the traveler did not move. His chest rose and fell in quick breaths. His mind wanted to run, but his feet would not obey. The mother's skin was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was smooth, almost translucent, glowing faintly as if light lived beneath it. Her frame was thin, fragile, every bone visible beneath her surface. She was alive, but barely. Her chest rose and fell in slow, weak rhythm. Beside her, the child was even thinner. Limbs folded tight, eyes large and round, glowing faintly like two dim lanterns. The child pressed its face into the mother's chest, hiding from the light. A faint whimper slipped out again, the same sound that had pulled him deeper into this cave. The traveler lowered the light for a moment, blinking hard. His thoughts raced. Aliens, real aliens. Not in books. Not in movies. Here in front of me. Fear clawed at him. His brain screamed danger. What if this was a trick? What if the mother only looked weak and the moment he got closer she would strike? What if others were hidden deeper in the cave waiting? He turned toward the entrance. He could leave now. The storm might have slowed. He could walk away, tell himself it was only his imagination. But then another sound reached him. The child coughed. It was soft, broken, painful. The kind of sound that belonged not to a monster but to something suffering, something close to death. His heart twisted. The fear in his chest warred with something else, pity. The traveler raised the light again. Slowly he stepped forward, one careful foot after another. His boots scraped against stone, each sound too loud in the heavy silence. The mother stirred at his movement. She lifted her head an inch, eyes struggling to open. They met his. Her gaze was not sharp, not wild, not dangerous. It was pleading, desperate. She raised a hand, thin, trembling, shaking as though it weighed 100 pounds. Not toward him, but toward the child, as if to say, not me. Help the child. The traveler stopped. The beam caught on her hand. Long, thin fingers. No claws, no weapons. Just weakness. Just need. He swallowed hard. His mind kept whispering danger, but his eyes told him something else. They were starving. They were dying, alone. God, he whispered, though his voice was barely a sound in the cave. The child made another small sound, curling tighter into the mother. His hand went to his pack. He almost laughed at the thought. What could he possibly offer? A half-empty water bottle, a piece of bread wrapped in plastic, a strip of dried meat. Human food. Would it poison them? Would it make them sick? But what choice was there? He pulled the bread out first. Slowly, carefully, as though even this small act might frighten them. He unwrapped it and held it out at arm's length. The mother's eyes followed the movement. Her lips parted, but no words came, only a soft rasp of breath. The traveler crouched a little, setting the bread on a flat rock a few feet from them. Then he pulled back, keeping the flashlight steady. His chest felt tight, his pulse loud in his ears. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the child moved. Small, thin fingers stretched out. The child's eyes flickered toward him, wary, afraid, but driven by hunger. Inch by inch, the little hand reached forward, trembling. It touched the bread, pulled it back quickly as if expecting pain. When nothing happened, the child tried again. This time it brought the bread close, sniffed it with a strange soft sound, then bit. The traveler held his breath. The child chewed slowly. Too slowly, as though it had forgotten how to eat. Then another bite, and another. The mother's eyes closed, relief softening her face for a moment. The traveler felt something shift inside him. Fear was still there, but something heavier pressed down now. Responsibility. He had fed them. He had stepped across a line. He could not undo it. He glanced toward the entrance of the cave. The rain outside had slowed, but the storm inside the cave was only growing stronger. He sat back against the wall, setting the flashlight on the ground so the beam glowed upward. The shadows stretched long and strange, but he no longer cared. His eyes stayed on them. Minutes passed. The child finished the bread, then curled close to the mother again. The traveler noticed her hand still raised. still pointing faintly at the child even in her weakness. A mother's last strength, not for herself, but for her child. The traveler looked down at his pack. He still had more food, but not much. He would need it for himself. Yet when his hand brushed against the dried meat, he knew he could not keep it. Not after what he had seen. He pulled it out and set it on the same rock. The child's eyes flickered to him again, glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time, the traveler thought he saw something other than fear in them. Something small, something fragile, trust. And trust, he realized, was more dangerous than fear, because now he could not leave. The cave was silent again, except for their breathing. Outside, the storm faded. Inside, something new had begun, a bond. Fragile as glass, yet powerful enough to hold him there. The traveler leaned his head back against the wall, staring into the dark. He had only wanted shelter from the rain. Instead, he had stepped into another world, one where every choice he made from now on would matter, and the eyes of a starving alien child were proof that walking away was no longer an option. The first contact, the cave had grown quiet again. The storm outside was only a faint murmur now, rain tapping softly on the rocks. But inside, silence pressed heavy between the three of them, the traveler, the mother, and the child. The flashlight glowed weakly on the ground, casting long shadows. The traveler's heart still raced, though his body had gone still. He had given them food. He had crossed that line, and now the air between them felt different. The child's glowing eyes blinked at him from the safety of its mother's arms. The bread was gone, the last crumbs licked from thin fingers. The dried meat still sat untouched on the rock. The mother was watching him, her face unreadable but her gaze unbroken. For the first time, the traveler realized that he was the intruder here. This was not just a cave. To them, it was a shelter, maybe even a last refuge. He had stepped into their hiding place uninvited, armed with nothing but his fear and his humanity. He shifted uncomfortably, the scrape of his boots echoing against stone. The child flinched at the sound, pressing closer into the mother's chest. Her hand moved weakly to shield it. The traveler froze again. He raised his palms slowly, a universal sign he had no weapon. His voice came low, soft, almost a whisper. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Of course, they didn't understand the words. He wasn't even sure why he spoke them. Maybe it was for himself, to remind his own shaking body that he meant no harm. The mother tilted her head slightly as if studying him. Her lips parted, but what came out was not a word he knew, a soft sound almost like wind moving through hollow stone. It was gentle, fragile, carrying a tone he could understand even if he couldn't translate it. Caution mixed with hope. The traveler's chest tightened. She was trying to communicate. He swallowed hard, then reached for his pack again. The child's eyes followed every movement, glowing brighter now with alertness. Slowly, carefully, he pulled out his water bottle. He unscrewed the cap, took a sip to show it was safe, then set it down near the dried meat. The mother's eyes flickered toward it. Her throat moved as she swallowed dryly. Her hand shook as she reached forward, but she stopped halfway, her strength failing her. The traveler felt a pull inside. Against every voice in his head warning him to stay back, he found himself crawling forward on his hands and knees. Slowly, carefully, his every muscle tense, ready to retreat at the slightest sign of threat. He picked up the bottle and held it out halfway. His hand shook, but he kept it steady enough. The mother stared at him, her glowing eyes unblinking. The silence stretched long, so long that he thought she might never take it. Then, with a trembling effort, she reached out, her fingers brushed his hand. Cold. Too cold, as if all warmth had drained from her body. Her touch was feather light, almost not there at all. She wrapped her thin hand around the bottle and pulled it toward her. The traveler's heart hammered. That single touch felt like the most fragile agreement ever made. Neither of them spoke the same language, but in that instant something passed between them. Trust. She lifted the bottle to her lips, drank slowly, carefully, then lowered it to the child. The child sipped too, water dribbling down its chin. Both of them sighed softly, almost at the same time, as if even that small relief meant everything. The traveler sat back, his legs stiff. He watched them, his mind a storm of questions. Who were they? Where had they come from? How had they ended up starving in this cave? The child looked at him again, eyes wide, glowing faintly. It tilted its head, curious now more than afraid. Then in a small, trembling voice it made a sound, a soft note almost like the beginning of a word. The traveler blinked. His chest tightened. It was trying. "Are you talking to me?" he whispered, though he knew they wouldn't understand. The child repeated the sound, tilting its head again, mimicking the shape of his mouth. The sound was broken, fragile, but it was directed at him. The traveler felt his fear shift again. This wasn't just survival, this was connection. They were reaching out even in their weakness. The mother raised her hand once more, pointing weakly toward the child, then toward him. Her gesture was slow, but clear enough to carry meaning. "See the child. Protect the child." The traveler's breath caught. He stared at her, then at the child, then back again. She was asking him for something he hadn't expected. Not food, not water, not even safety for herself. She was asking him to care for the child if she could not. The cave seemed to grow heavier with the weight of it. The storm outside was nothing compared to this. The traveler didn't answer. He couldn't, his throat was too tight. Instead, he just nodded. A small, slow movement, not even sure if she understood. The mother's eyes softened for a brief moment. Then they closed, her body sagging as if the effort had drained what little strength she had left. The child whimpered, clinging tighter. The traveler leaned back against the wall, his own body trembling now. He had come into this cave to escape the rain. But what he had found was something far greater, far heavier. He stared at the alien child, its glowing eyes locked onto him. And for the first time, he felt the truth settle deep in his bones. He was no longer just a traveler hiding from a storm. He had stepped into a role he didn't choose, but one that had already begun. First contact wasn't about words or science. It was about survival, about trust, about a bond forming in the dark of a cave, and that bond was only growing stronger. The choice. The storm outside had faded to a gentle drizzle. Water still dripped from the rocks above the cave, but the wild roar of thunder was gone. The forest was quiet now, peaceful, safe. But inside the cave, the traveler was anything but calm. He sat with his back against the rough wall, staring at the alien mother and child. The flashlight cast weak light, enough to show their faces. The mother's eyes were shut, her breathing shallow. The child leaned against her, half asleep, its glowing eyes fluttering open and closed. The traveler's pack lay at his side, lighter than before. He had given them food. He had given them water. He had crossed the line that separated stranger from ally. But what now? He rubbed his face with both hands, feeling the grit of dirt and rain still clinging to his skin. His mind ran in circles. I should leave. The thought came again and again. The storm was ending. Soon the path back would be clear. He could walk away, pretend none of this had happened. Pretend he hadn't seen them. He imagined stepping out of the cave, breathing the fresh air of the forest, feeling freedom in his legs again. No glowing eyes watching him. No silent pleas pressing into his heart. Just himself in the road. But when he turned his eyes back to the child, the thought cracked and fell apart. The little one had shifted in its sleep. Thin arms wrapped tightly around the mother's frame, as if even in dreams it feared being left alone. Its chest rose and fell with effort, each breath shallow. Its ribs showed like thin branches beneath skin that glowed faintly. The traveler's chest tightened. He had seen hungry children before, on streets and places forgotten by most. He knew the sound of weak coughs, the look of bones too sharp beneath skin. And now he saw it again, not in a human child, but in something not of this world. The pain was the same. He clenched his fists. If I leave, they will die here. The mother is too weak. The child is too small. But another voice whispered inside him, if you stay, you may die too. What if others came? What if the hunters the mother had hinted at were close? He had nothing but a flashlight and a few scraps of food. Against any real danger, he was nothing. He leaned his head back against the wall, staring into the dark ceiling of the cave. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the drip of water and the faint breathing of the two fragile lives before him. Then the child stirred. Its eyes opened again, glowing faintly in the dim light. It turned its head, searching the cave until its gaze landed on him. For a moment, the world shrank to that single stare. The child blinked slowly, then raised one small hand. Not reaching for food, not begging, just lifting its fingers slightly toward him as if saying, "Don't go." The traveler felt something in him break. His throat grew tight, his chest heavy. He pressed his palm against the ground, steadying himself. He whispered, voice low, almost angry at himself, "Damn it," because he knew then he could not leave. The decision landed heavy, like a stone thrown into still water. Ripples spread through him, carrying both fear and certainty. He was staying. The traveler reached for his pack again, pulling out what little food remained. He set it near the mother and child. Then he shifted closer, slowly, carefully, until he sat only a few feet from them. The child watched him with wide eyes, glowing brighter now, curious instead of afraid. The mother stirred, opening her eyes again. Weak as she was, she seemed to understand. She looked at him long, silent, unblinking. Then her hand, shaking, slid across the stone until her fingers touched his boot. A small gesture. But it was enough. It said, "You chose. You stay." The traveler swallowed hard. He felt the weight of it settle deep inside. He was no longer just a man hiding from rain. He was something more now, protector, maybe even guardian. His mind screamed at the danger. He had no plan, no strength, no idea what hunted them, but his heart was louder. He looked at the child again, saw those glowing eyes and knew leaving was no longer possible. The cave seemed to shift around him. It was no longer just stone and shadow. It was a bond, a fragile promise, a silent pact between species that had never met before. Outside, the forest dripped with rain, quiet and calm after the storm. But inside, a new storm had begun, one made not of thunder or water, but of choices and consequences. The traveler wrapped his arms around his knees, staring at the two fragile lives he had tied himself to. He breathed slowly, trying to calm the storm inside his chest. Whatever waited beyond this cave, whatever danger hunted them, he would face it now, because he had made his choice. The secret. The cave was silent except for the soft breathing of its three occupants. The traveler sat with his back to the wall, his flashlight glowing weakly on the stone. The alien mother and child rested a few feet away, the child curled against her chest. He thought they were asleep. He almost hoped they were. But then the mother's eyes opened. Dim light glowed within them, pale and strange, yet filled with something he understood. Awareness. Slowly she shifted, turning her face toward him. Her lips moved, shaping sounds he could not understand. At first they were only whispers, broken and weak. But she kept trying, her voice carrying faint echoes through the cave. The traveler leaned forward, heart pounding. He didn't know why. He couldn't possibly understand her language. And yet something in the way she spoke made him listen, not just with his ears but with his whole being. She lifted her hand. Her long fingers trembled as she pointed toward the cave entrance, then curled back toward herself and the child. She made another sound, sharper this time. Then another, the traveler's brow furrowed. He tried to piece it together. She pointed outside, then to herself, then to the child. The tone of her voice dropped when she spoke again, low, warning, heavy with fear. They came from outside. They fled here. They are in danger. He felt the meaning strike him even without words. His pulse quickened. His chest tightened. The mother touched the child's head with her thin hand, her fingers brushing the glowing eyes. She whispered again, her voice breaking. The sound was soft, almost like mourning. The traveler swallowed. He understood enough. The child was the reason they ran. The child was the reason they hid. The mother's trembling hand pointed again toward the cave mouth. Her tone sharpened, harsher now, filled with fear. She dragged her finger across the stone floor, leaving a faint line of dust. She tapped it twice, then spread her hand wide as though describing something larger, something powerful. The traveler stared. His chest felt hollow. She was speaking of them, whoever chased her. Whoever had forced her and the child to this desperate place. Hunters. The word formed in his mind without her saying it. Hunters. He rubbed his jaw, staring into the dark mouth of the cave. He had no idea what kind of beings they were. Were they like her? Like the child? Or something worse? He only knew one thing. They were close enough that she feared them still. The mother's voice softened again. She looked at him, her pale eyes locking with his. Her hand rose one last time, not pointing outward now, but at him. Her lips moved, shaping a new sound. Slow, careful, almost like she wanted him to remember. The traveler's heart thudded as he realized what she was doing. She wasn't only warning him, she was trying to teach him. A word, a piece of her language. He listened hard, repeating the sound under his breath. His tongue stumbled over it, clumsy and rough. But the mother's eyes softened slightly, as though approving his attempt. It was the first bridge between them, a single sound carrying meaning. The child stirred at the noise, blinking its glowing eyes open. It looked between the mother and the traveler, then echoed the sound in a small, broken voice. The traveler froze. The child had given the word to him as well. Something inside him shifted. He wasn't just a stranger in their cave anymore. He was part of their fragile circle, drawn into their secret. The mother leaned back, her strength failing. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, her eyes half closing. She had given him what she could, a warning, a word, and a plea. The traveler sat in silence, his thoughts a storm. Hunters. That was the truth hiding behind her broken gestures. They were not alone in this world. Something hunted them, and if those hunters found the cave, he would not be spared either. He clenched his fists. Fear gnawed at him. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to run while he still could. But he had already made his choice. He had given them food, water, trust. And now, he had been given something back, their secret. The traveler looked at the child again. Its glowing eyes were fixed on him, unblinking, waiting. The word it had spoken still echoed in his ears, heavy with meaning he didn't fully grasp but couldn't ignore. He whispered it again, quietly, as if repeating it might bind him closer. The child's eyes softened. For the first time, the faintest hint of a smile touched its strange face. The traveler leaned back, exhaling hard. His decision from before only grew heavier. Staying meant danger, but leaving now would mean betrayal. And betrayal was something he could not live with. The cave had grown darker, the flashlight's beam growing dim as its battery weakened. The silence pressed down heavier, broken only by the distant drip of water. But to the traveler, the silence was no longer empty. It carried weight. It carried a secret. And that secret was this. The storm outside had been only the beginning. The real storm was still coming. The hunters were out there, searching, waiting, and now he was part of the story. The decision, the cave had grown colder. The storm outside had passed, leaving the forest damp and quiet. Moonlight spilled faintly at the entrance, silver against wet stone. The flashlight on the ground flickered, its battery nearly gone. Shadows stretched long and deep, hiding corners that seemed endless. The traveler sat near the wall, knees pulled close, staring at the two figures huddled together. The mother was weaker now, her chest rising and falling shallowly. The child pressed against her, glowing eyes wide open, watching him with quiet trust. His pack was nearly empty. Only a little food remained, not enough for three. Not enough for long. The choice loomed heavy. He could leave. The storm was over. The path out of the forest was clear. He could take his pack, step into the night, and disappear. The mother and child would fade away in this cave, their secret buried with them. No one would ever know. Or he could stay and risk his life for two beings he didn't understand. Beings hunted by others he had not yet seen. If the hunters came, he would be nothing but prey alongside them. His heart pounded. His mind pulled him both ways. Go, live, forget this, stay, protect them. Do not betray the trust in those glowing eyes. The traveler dragged his hands through his wet hair, frustration building like fire in his chest. He cursed under his breath. The cave pressed in on him, stone walls closing tighter with every thought. The child stirred. Slowly it crawled closer, thin arms trembling with effort. It stopped only a few feet away, blinking up at him. Its glowing eyes were steady, innocent but filled with something far too heavy for a child. Hope. The traveler felt his chest ache. He had seen that look before, years ago, in places where children waited for help that never came. He had walked away once, and the memory still haunted him. He couldn't walk away again. The child reached out a hand. Its fingers were small, thin, trembling. The gesture was simple, but the meaning was clear. Don't leave. The traveler froze. His breath caught. Slowly, he extended his own hand. Their fingers met, cold against warm, alien against human. In that moment, the decision solidified. He could not leave. The traveler's voice came low, almost a whisper. "All right, I stay." The child tilted its head as if trying to understand. The words didn't matter. The tone did. The child leaned forward, pressing its forehead against his hand, a soft gesture of trust. The mother opened her eyes at the touch. Weak though she was, she seemed to understand too. She lifted her hand slightly, fingers trembling, and dragged them across the stone floor in a small circle. Then she pointed at him, a symbol, a claim. The traveler realized what she meant. He was part of their circle now. Part of them. Fear still gnawed at him. He knew what staying meant. He knew danger would come, that the hunters were still out there searching. But when he looked into the child's glowing eyes, fear bent beneath something stronger. Responsibility. He shifted closer, reaching for his pack again. He divided what food remained, setting a piece near the child and keeping one for himself. It wasn't enough. Not for long, but it was a start. As the child ate slowly, carefully, the traveler leaned back against the wall. His mind was still a storm, but the choice was made. Outside, the forest dripped with rain, every leaf shining under moonlight. The world looked calm, peaceful, but he knew calm was a lie. Somewhere in the dark, hunters moved. He could almost feel their presence in the wind. He thought of leaving again, just for a second, but the child's soft breathing pulled him back. That sound was fragile, faint, but it anchored him more than any chain could. The traveler exhaled, slow and heavy. "If they come, then they come," he whispered to himself. He closed his eyes, trying to rest, though his body stayed tense, ready. The flickering light of the flashlight dimmed further, casting the cave into near darkness. Only the glow of the child's eyes remained, two small lights shining through the shadow. The traveler stared at them until sleep tugged at his edges. In that final moment of wakefulness, one thought echoed clear. He had chosen not to save himself, he had chosen them. And whatever waited outside the cave, whatever shadow hunted in the night, he would face it, not alone, but as part of something greater than himself. The bond, cliffhanger ending. The cave was dark now. The flashlight had gone out, leaving only the pale glow of the child's eyes. The traveler sat awake, leaning against the wall, listening to the faint sounds of their breathing. Every small noise outside made his body tense, but nothing came. Not yet. He had made his choice. He had stayed. The child rested against the mother, but every so often its eyes opened to glance at him, glowing softly through the shadows. There was no fear left in those eyes, only trust. And that trust pressed heavier on his chest than any weight he had ever carried. The night passed slowly. Each drip of water from the stone ceiling felt louder, sharper. He wanted to sleep, but he didn't dare. Instead, he watched them. Every rise and fall of the mother's chest. Every small twitch of the child's hands. He didn't know why, but he felt that if he looked away, if he let himself drift too far, they might vanish. When dawn finally came, the mouth of the cave filled with pale light. The forest outside glistened with dew. Birds called softly from the trees. The storm had washed the world clean, but peace did not reach him. He moved quietly, stretching his stiff body. His stomach growled. He had given away too much food. His hands shook with hunger, but when he looked at the mother and child, the ache inside him dulled. They needed it more than he did. The child stirred, blinking awake. Its eyes glowed brighter in the morning light. It pushed itself up weakly, then crawled closer, one slow movement at a time. The traveler froze, unsure, but did not move back. The child reached his side, then sat clumsily, leaning against his arm. Its small frame was cold, fragile, and light as air. The traveler stared down at it, unsure what to do. Slowly, awkwardly, he lifted his hand and placed it on the child's back. The child made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. It pressed closer, closing its glowing eyes again. The traveler swallowed hard. Something unfamiliar burned in his chest. Something deeper than fear, heavier than pity. It was a bond. He glanced at the mother. She was watching, eyes half open, her weak face soft with relief. She had given him her trust the night before, and now the child had followed. He looked back toward the cave mouth. Outside, the forest looked beautiful, but he knew beauty could hide danger. He remembered the mother's gestures, the words she had tried to teach him. Hunters, they were still out there. The traveler's jaw tightened. His hand remained on the child's back, steady now, no longer trembling. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered, though they couldn't understand his words. But maybe they didn't need to. Time passed in silence. He thought of leaving, of finding more food, of searching for some way to keep them alive. But leaving them alone even for a short while felt impossible. What if the hunters came when he was gone? He was caught in that thought when it happened. A sound, faint but sharp enough to freeze his blood. It came from outside the cave. Not the chirp of birds, not the rustle of leaves. A crack, a snap, a footstep on wet branches.